but looking at it in the vein of worker safety. The great thing about the work group, though, is that we have been able to also work closely with DHEC, Myra, Fran, to figure out and make sure that we included the public health part of this as well. In addition to that, as you saw the evolution of the documents, we also got feedback from folks in the industry, particularly for cosmetology. That's one of the reasons why they were specifically broken out, because they did have some specific concerns that they wanted to be addressed. Close contact, and you'll also notice that it has service industry as well listed there, because that could go beyond a salon. It could go beyond a barber shop. We have had estheticians, we've had massage parlors, things of that nature to contact us that don't fit squarely into the Cosmo realm, which is why we thought it would be really good to make sure we had a general guideline for anyone who might consider themselves to be close contact. And so that's why you see those two separate documents there.
I got to remember I'm on mute. Thank you, Christina. That's a good summary of how we ended up with two different documents. Myra, did you want to add anything before we open it up?
I'll just add that we really like the process that we put in place. And as Christina just mentioned, we're really relying on the experts in these businesses, those owners and operators who run these businesses every day, and they're stepping up to look at different considerations they need to think about as they reopen. And so fortunate to the leadership, and we've been able to look at some of the suggestions and guidances that are being put together to make sure it's consistent in line with the CDC guidance, and it will be a great strategy for us as far as health protection as we reopen. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Myra. So want to open it up for any discussion, any questions for those of you who had the ability to read through those. I know prior to this, John Winarchek, I believe you had a question. I don't know if the last round answered any of those, but please feel free.
Okay, well, I'll speak up and I'll take the first lead here. The first thing I wanted to say was, you know, I think we're all paying very close attention to our fellow task force members over on the protection component. And the two things that they continue to emphasize over in protection are effective testing and contact tracing, and how important those are, because as we loosen the reins on the economy, it's going to be very important that we can start to screen out people who are actively contagious with the COVID virus and keep them away, keep them at home, keep them in a recovery mode so they don't cross-contaminate other people. And if we do end up with an outbreak, to be able to jump on that outbreak through effective contact tracing and minimize its effect across the general population. So what I'm looking for in all of these documents is some sign of, in the absence of testing that is instantaneous, some sign of the fact that we're trying to screen out people who have all the signs of an active infection, either through temperatures or through self-diagnosis of symptoms, because essentially we just can't afford to have them in retail establishments or restaurants or barbershops or beauty salons. And then the second thing is, I'm looking at all of these things from the standpoint of minimizing the gatherings of people, that in the event you need to go back 3 days and start listing people who are in the contact tracing list, that you'd have a good shot at getting the correct people identified. So I'm sorry for the preamble, but my question is, in the cosmetology guidelines, I think what needs to be included is the fact that a warning to or an advisory to people who've made reservations to come into the shops, that if they are actively, expressing symptoms of COVID-19, if they are in close contact with somebody who's been diagnosed as a positive case, that they need to rebook that reservation, that they should not come in. And I didn't see that guidance in the cosmetology guidelines. So is there a possibility to put that in?
Myra, I think this is the customer facing side. Was this something discussed?
So this is Christina. We did talk about that, and I think it may be in the close contact document, but not specifically laid out here in the cosmetology document. And so I feel like that's something we could definitely add.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Is the close contact document also supposed to apply to cosmetology establishments? So it's, the general guidelines for all close contact establishments plus the specific guidelines for cosmetology?
Yes. So I will tell you they weren't necessarily in that order. However, yes, we are, when we think about cosmetology and all those who might fall under that umbrella, we also consider them to be close contact and or service industries.
Well, I think y'all done a good job of getting that information in there. I think we just got to get it in the right order. That might be the key, is just have it in the right order, because you got it there. We just have to get it, the guidelines laid out correctly.
And then Myra, I wonder, to John's first point about as the state develops more testing availability and the contact tracing, how you're thinking about these documents as documents that will evolve.
Yes, I think certainly, I think since day one when we put these guidelines together, we have all had a good understanding that we need to emphasize that they're interim guidelines and they will continue to be updated and modified as we continue to respond to the pandemic and the specific situations, and taking into consideration things that are coming out about additional testing data and anything with contact tracing capability and stuff. So I think we are going to see these documents or guidelines continuing to be evolving and right in correlation with our health information.
Thank you, Myra.
One other thing that I have, while I still have the microphone, with regard to contact tracing, my thought is that, and it was in the close contact one, again, not necessarily expressed as well in the cosmetology guidelines, but I think if you can envision any kind of a collection of people, like in a waiting area, even though you minimize the number of people and try to maximize the distance between them, I think the emphasis in all of these one-on-one personal services situations is that you would have the person with the reservation come in only when they're ready to get seated or into their barber chair, so that you don't have people gathering together, because that's where the contact tracing comes in on an after the fact basis. Is you're trying to identify how many people may have been in the same area touching the same thing with the infected person. So again, if you're going to err on one side or the other on all of these guidelines, I'd err on the side of kind of to the maximum extent possible, minimize collections of people in one specific area, either inbound or outbound or at cash register, because that's going to be very important.
That's some really good information. All right, Miss Jennifer.
Anyone else have any questions or additional comments with relation to close contact and cosmetology? Okay, so we will take this input. Christina has offered to kind of make the connection between the close contact and the cosmetology. And so now we're going to move on to Dwayne. I don't know what order you want to take your attractions in, but would love to talk about some of those now.
Sure. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, members of the committee too. Essentially, the attractions industry does not have a state association, much like hotels and restaurants do with the South Carolina Restaurant Lodging Association. So we took a look at that and basically put together a small committee group, and you'll see them at the very beginning. Willie Calloway from the State Museum, Carowinds, Lazarus Entertainment, which represents some of the small attractions in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina Aquarium, and the Riverbank Zoo. Essentially, with the 5 of them, and a lot of these people have been in the business for quite some time, and they represent quite a variation in attractions. Unlike restaurants and hotels as well, there's broad category in regard to attractions. That's everything from miniature golf in Myrtle Beach all the way up to Carowinds, which goes into 2 states, and sort of everything in between. So what we did, I'm not going to go through all this, but just basically came with an overview of what I just talked about. Obviously put in a legal disclaimer. And then it talks about general preparation and guidelines that are developed would apply, quite frankly, to any operation, regardless of the attraction. And then you'll see general operating guidelines and recommendations, operating guidelines and recommendations. And then it gets into some of the categories, and this does not cover all. I will tell you, there are more things, and there are some things that are, quite frankly, by themselves in some respects, but they're outdoor attractions, indoor attractions, exhibit-oriented attractions like a zoo, aquarium, or museum, or a historic site. Theater attractions, this is live production and movie theaters. And then it gets into amusement park rides and go-kart tracks, walking tours. These are in multiple locations. Water parks, which are in multiple locations. And then weddings. Weddings are in there because not as an attraction per se, but a lot of these places like a museum or a plantation or a aquarium host weddings quite a bit. And we know we're timing wise, we're a little ways from having any weddings of any size, but nonetheless, want to go ahead and get that in there included for discussion now. And then just sort of additional staff recommended guidelines for everyone that would apply. Then you'll see essentially what amounts to a flow chart in case there is an exposure from someone. From an employee, it gives you sort of a flow chart of what to do in case you have an employee is exposed. And then down below are quite a few links to different things, from the CDC to the EPA to OSHA to additional state resources that we have, including accelerateSC's website. Again, I just want to give you a quick overview of how that sort of came about, its origins. Again, trying to make something that was sort of industry-born, healthcare approved. Myra has it now and has looked at it. It has not been completely reviewed by DHEC. Myra, feel free to chime in here anywhere, but I know you have it now, but I know you've not been through it all. But that's essentially what it is. Again, it's all encompassing. Some of these people will be ready to open pretty soon. Some are down the road. But I wanted to get that out to the different categories out there for discussion.
Questions for Dwayne, anyone? Dwayne, thank you for doing this hard work. I know a lot of people have been seeking your advice and counsel.
Sure. Yeah. Myra, any comments there? I didn't know if you've had a chance to look at it or not yet.
We have not, but I know that our infection control staff are. Dr. Traxler's taking a look at it today. I know just first observations, it looks really good. And so we will be getting that feedback to you, if not later today, sometime tomorrow. But looks like some great information.
Great. And I appreciate all of your help, Myra, as well.
Could I ask a question?
Please, go ahead.
I've been watching the news sometimes. I'm trying not to watch too much of the news and see too much negative stuff, but I noticed that in Asia, both Japan and China, there have been a lot of additions to theme parks and theaters and so forth of the temperature control that you walk through, almost like the metal detectors. I wonder if there's any thought toward temperature checking or any of those, I would call them kiosks, for any of our theme parks.
Yes, it was talked about, and I believe it's in here, if it's possible. It is in one of the bullet points in there about the possibility of doing, again, by no means a requirement, but certainly where applicable, it could be in there. You know, I think some of the larger ones may do it, particularly like a Carowinds or someone. I can't speak for them, but there's a possibility that some of the larger, typically where there's large numbers of people coming through, I don't think that, you know, I don't know that for some of the smaller ones they're considering doing that. That was sort of the gist of the instructions when we did this.
I didn't know, it seems like those might be allowable expenses out of that money that we discussed in our last meeting, the 1.9 billion, I think it was. Perhaps that would be an allowable expense for these theme parks in the dollars that were allotted to COVID purchases, just throwing it out there.
Let's put that on the parking lot list. That's a really good suggestion that we could help them in that way.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, there's a, you know, I think if it's available to them, you know, through some sort of government agency provided, I think certainly be a lot more doing it.
Okay, just a thought.
Any other questions for Dwayne before he moves on to the other categories?
And I guess I just wanted to clarify, Dwayne, that one, this is an incredible document to have all of these various types of attractions. And I think I just want to underscore, you said that these attractions wouldn't all be ready to be open at the same time, even though we've lumped them all in the same guidance document. Correct. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. There's such variation in here, as I mentioned before, that it would be a wide variety of different opening dates here. But nonetheless, they you know, we had to lump everybody into something, and a lot of things fell under attractions. So that's where we came up with this.
Excellent.
Jennifer, given the fact, this is John with Archick again. Given the fact that a lot of these documents, you know, we got either late yesterday or this morning, and they're pretty lengthy. Could you pass out or email out the cross-contact list for each of the specific topics so that the response team members could also see the questions, ask their own questions, and get the updated drafts as this progresses forward tomorrow? That would give us all
an email list for everyone on this call. Is that what you're asking? I'm sorry.
Well, if for instance, for the amusement parks and those facilities, there's going to be a contact list of people who are working on that document. So the response team members, plus people from DHEC, people from OSHA, and the people from the industry who are sharing information as this thing proceeds forward to finalization. So it's, you know, instead of channeling all of the questions and answers through you because you're busy, maybe a direct contact list with those teams that are working on each of these documents.
Yeah, primarily it's one of two teams. It's Myra and Christina are kind of on both. So they're either kind of championed through my team, which is why I asked my colleague Ashley to join us, or Dwayne and his team. So if they fall into everything but tourism and attractions and hospitality, they kind of fall to commerce. And John, this is really happening so fast. I think it might be easier to have, you know, either my team or Dwayne funnel comments that you have versus whole teams, if that makes sense. I know Christina and Myra are underwater.
This is Ashley. I don't mind taking any type of comments or questions that they have related to the form, and I can funnel it to the team as we're having periodic conference calls in regards to putting the documents together, if that works for you.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I'll follow up after this with Ashley's information. And we're trying to get these out to you all faster. So we'll continue to do that job as well.
This might be jumping the gun, but could we treat water parks and neighborhood swimming pools kind of under the same guideline, or are we going to talk about that at a different time?
I think the pools are coming up, right?
Our pool's next, Dwayne.
Yeah, swimming pools and DHEC has that in hand, and they have come out. Myra, I'll let you talk about sort of where that is in regard to pools. And when I say pools, that's all commercial pools. That includes hotels, and those as well as those that are not part of hotels. But Myra, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, and I'm going to also get Fran to kind of add some of the specifics. But we actually put together a few items for the swimming pool guidelines, and just probably 30 minutes ago got off of a call with some of the swimming pool operators across the state. And they had some invaluable information and additional best practices that we think are going to be very helpful for swimming pool operators as they look to reopen. One of the significant things I think that came out of it as well is that some of the operators are talking to some of their colleagues, like in the state of Georgia, and trying to see, you know, what guidelines did y'all have in place? Did you have users that showed up? Did they have confidence to show up? And if they did, what were some of those items that you're doing? You know, we're looking at some very creative solutions. And Fran, if you're still on the line, if you wouldn't mind maybe talking about some specifics. I know you drafted some of the things and have already updated it and sent it back to Dr. Traxler with infection control based on the great feedback we got today, which we're going to continue to get feedback from the industry as a whole. Fran?
Sure. Some of the more creative ideas they gave us to add to this were considering lane reservations for family groups to use a specific lane or area of a pool, similar to the way you reserve a racquetball court. Consider a phased approach to opening that brings back lane swimming and limited number participant classes before opening for general swimming. And then removing or regularly disinfecting, but they were leaning toward the side of removing shareable equipment like kickboards and floats. So we were able to get some really good, I think, specific information to put in here for other folks to consider. And Dr. Traxler has already reviewed and approved the additions, and I have forwarded on to the small group.
So when we receive that, we'll send it out to you all, and then we'll let you know who the lead person is that you should send comments to. Is that fair?
Sure.
We good with schools?
Yes.
Okay. And then I know, Dwayne, we don't have anything specific on hotels, but obviously there are portions of hotels that are not open at this time. Pools is one.
Correct.
I think we are going to talk about fitness centers. I sent that out right before the call. Anything else with regards to hotels you want to discuss?
No, the two other areas, spas and meeting space. I'll let Bobby chime in here. The South Carolina Restaurant Lodging Association is working on a plan as we speak, which includes pools we've already talked about. You just mentioned fitness centers coming up, but also the meeting space component, as well as those hotels that have spas located within them. Bobby, I know you're getting close on that. You want to briefly talk about that?
Actually, John, is John on the phone? John would have that information. John Durst?
Hey, before John starts speaking, just because we don't have video of everybody, and so if somebody, before they speak, if they can just say who they are, so for the benefit of everybody knows who is speaking, because there are a bunch of people who've been speaking. I'm going to be candid with you, have no clue who it is.
Okay.
Who is that speaking?
It's John Durst. Yeah, no. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dwayne. And Bobby, appreciate it. Succinctly, where we are is that we have put together a some guidelines for reopening of hotels, and we have tapped the expertise of the American Hotel and Lodging Association, of course, operators within this state, my counterparts around the country, and we've also reached out to some other entities to be sure that we're incorporating best practices. All of that is in a document that we have sent over to DHEC to get their invaluable review and input, and so certainly we expect to have something ready by the 1st of next week.
Thank you, John. This is Dwayne again.
Okay, this is Jennifer, and want to kind of round out hotels and pools. Both of those are, as you heard, in progress, and those are documents that will be shared with this committee as soon as we feel like we've got something that's most of the way there and shareable. So you can look out for those. I think now we're on to fitness centers. Or
Hey, Jennifer?
yes, Lieutenant Governor.
That'd be great. How are you? So I just want to be clear. What about pools at like condo buildings, like at the coast? Are those being considered public pools? Are those being considered private pools? How are they being classified?
So Myra, I believe those are public pools.
They are based on the swimming pool regulatory definition. Those are considered public pools. The only pools that are not part of this are your individual residential pools.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So fitness centers has been a hot topic of late. I think everybody is, while they were itching to get outdoors, now they're itching to get back into their fitness routine. So we tried to fast track some guidance on fitness centers. I'm not sure who from if Christina or Ashley or Myra, who wants to take the intro to the creation of this document.
Hey, Jennifer, this is Ashley. I can take that one. So
okay.
We broke them all up, and this is one that our assistant industry manager worked on a good bit, and she received quite a bit of guidance from one of the directors of the YMCA, and they had some fitness center association type guidelines that they were sharing with her, and some other pieces of information that they have posted on their corporate site. And she's also taken some information from a corporate contact with Anytime Fitness to get some guidance on what are some of the things that they're looking at in terms of reopening and what type of procedures are they going to put in place to make sure people are protected. There's distancing, the cleaning of equipment, and that nature. So we took on that piece, went through our same process of putting it all together in one document, sharing it with the group, had a couple of questions here and there, got a couple of things changed. So this document that everybody has now is the final, you can say, draft of the fitness centers.
Great. And I know that this group received this document an hour before this meeting. If anybody had a chance to look at it, happy to take any questions or, just general comments. Otherwise, we ask you to look through that. And again, I'll forward Ashley's contact information to you so that as you do look at it, any comments or suggestions that you have can be funneled back through her for this particular category. And so like fitness centers, we also provided faith-based businesses a guidance on that. And I think, Ashley, this was a similar process to create this document.
Yes, the similar process to create this document. I believe Myra and Fran worked on this one a good bit. We also had some guidance that was forwarded over from the Southern Baptist Association, Church Association. So we pulled some information from there, but I don't know if Fran or Myra, if you wanted to add anything to this on how we pieced it all together.
Sure, this is Fran. We also, we did get some more stakeholder input as well. After we had a draft done, we sent it out for some comment, and I think it was the most important phrase in it is that they will, I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull it up here. It says that faith-based organizations should comply with the following additional guidelines when they choose to open. In other words, this is not saying when to or what to do. It's just saying when you choose to open, and then we provide some specific guidance and input into how things should look once that occurs.
Okay, any comments right now? Okay, so again, this will be something that once you're able to spend some time looking through, that we ask that you provide feedback back to Ashley, and she will share that with the group so that we can finalize that document. So those are the documents that we plan on discussing today. And again, there's several that will require some homework from y'all, and we look forward to getting your feedback. Ashley, I know we're working on several more. Child care is one. Could you please update us on what else we might expect?
Yes, so yes, we're still waiting to get some guidance over from DSS, who is helping as well with the guidance for the child care facilities. And also in the pipeline, we're going to have some representatives from our SC Logistics. They will be working on guidance for transportation and logistics companies in the state, that sector. And I do know that Sarah has it with the SCMA. I know she's on this call. Her great team has been working on guidance as well for manufacturers. So we'll be looking at some additional sectors. But again, yet if anybody has any feedback or questions for me, Jennifer will be sending out my information. I'll be happy to look at it and get it passed off to the team.
Yes, and so what we've been trying to work on is those kind of prioritizing those close contact businesses that fall under the governor's order to remain closed at this time. And as you can see, what we're doing now is we're kind of moving into those businesses that may have been open during this time, and some companies chose not to stay open, or some have been open, but continuing to provide some of these best practices, working with the trade associations. So any suggestions that you all have about other guidance that you feel like would be really useful for the general public and business owners as we continue to evolve and move our economy forward. And as Myra said, you know, as new developments occur, as we learn more about this virus, as we have new protocols put in place for testing, et cetera, we do plan on making all of that part of the updates. So, and you all can email me other sectors you feel like that we should focus on that we haven't thought through yet. Or you can shout them out right now.
Does anybody have, this is Helen, does anybody have anything for Jennifer before we move on? Great, Jennifer.
Okay, so I've talked to a number of you who would like to have additional discussions relating to issues that businesses are facing as they reopen. So not so much, you know, how do we reopen and what's the safe way to reopen, but some of the challenges that we're working on as we move forward. So we do have the opportunity to have one of our more standard, if you will, meetings next week where we could utilize the Alumni Center do that. So I wanted to toss that option out to the group. I think right now, if I looked at the schedule, James, I think Wednesday would be available to us. I think there are meetings on Monday only scheduled. Is that right?
Monday and Tuesday, we have meetings scheduled, but Wednesday is wide open.
So we could do a meeting on Wednesday.
In person.
Yeah, right, in person.
Yeah.
One of the things that I know we want to discuss, and I've got, a little bit of an update for you all. We have talked about childcare and the concern that not just businesses opening have, but businesses who are operating have. And through this process and working with DSS on the guidance for childcare centers, we have learned a whole lot more about what DSS is doing with related to childcare. So one of the things I thought we might want to discuss at the next meeting is to bring in Director Mike Leach and have him talk about what they're doing. They're doing quite a bit, but there is clearly more needs that they have. And I think having him talk about the needs of the community of childcare, again, this is going to be what we call daycare centers, and obviously camp opportunities as well. But I think one of the questions we've all had is what are some of the reasons that only about 50% of daycare centers are open, and he can address a lot of those questions. So I thought he would be a good person to have in and have a discussion about how this group might recommend assistance for them. So I throw that out as an opportunity, as one topic that we could discuss next time.
Hey, Jennifer, before this is James.
Yeah.
Before anybody speaks on that issue, I misspoke. Tuesday's wide open,
Okay.
And the rest of the week. Monday there's a component meeting in the morning and one in the afternoon, but Tuesday on is wide open.
Thank you for that clarification.
Does anybody have other issues? Oh, first, this is Helen. Does anybody have any other issues that they would like for Jennifer to address? I know we've got on our parking lot list the thing that we talked to Senator Graham and Senator Scott about, which is the liability issue. Jennifer, I felt like there might have been one other thing on the parking lot list. Am I forgetting something?
I'm going to access that. I think, Ted, do you want to comment on liability and what we might, I'm going to put you on the spot, but what we might be able to discuss from the work you've been doing?
So I think it would be helpful maybe is at the next meeting, Sarah Hazard and I gave an overview of the proposed legislation that we're talking to legislators about. So, I think if you're looking for things to put on the next agenda, Christian Sora, who's on a different subcommittee, the Hospital Association, Rebecca's on this call, and Sarah Hazard, and then the Medical Association, we've been working in concert on some legislation to offer and been talking to legislators about that. So we would love to bring that.
This is Helen. I think that'd be really important because that seems to be the latest thing that we're hearing the most of right now. So we would really love to have y'all's wisdom on that. What else for everyone?
This is John Winarchik again. Ted, one of the disturbing things that we heard last week was that the legislature, even though we're stacking up through various aspects of the task force legislation that needs to be enacted, the legislature is only going to meet for a single day between now and September 15th. Maybe in our meeting next week, we can kind of get some insider information out if there's any possibility that could be changed or why that process works the way that it does, because a lot of this stuff is just going to get log jammed if they're not meeting until September.
Hey, this is Tommy Pope. I'm not sure the 1 day is accurate. We're always dealing with a moving target over there, but members of the House have been told to prepare to be available at least for the next 3 weeks, for 3 days for the next 3 weeks. Again, a lot of it's contingent to what happens with sine die and what happens with the continuing resolution, but we're prepared to go back to work. And there's a number of things from the sine die and continuing resolution to the governor calling us back to allow us to do so. My biggest concern every time we talk about these issues, we proved a couple of weeks ago, we can't even agree on a continuing resolution that lets us work past the end of the fiscal year. So I think that's why a lot of times you heard maybe the senators or House members say, you know, we've got to be careful. Ted, we talked about some of this stuff yesterday on the radio. We got to be careful what we interject to try to streamline the process so we can get these important things done.
This is Gerald. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
So, Tommy, have you been talking to them about the agreement that they have on the continuing resolution?
Well, Gerald, you'd had worked last time we had an agreement, I thought. So
no, this is different. So okay. I think what happens is that they've got something worked out on the continuing resolution as it relates to Santee Cooper, and the way that the rule is going to work is that this continuing resolution that was sent to the House is the one that the Senate sent, and so they will amend it to put that language on. And they've got some COVID-19 language that they have to work on disparate treatment of African Americans that they're planning on putting on. And once it gets back to the Senate won't be able to amend it because it's in the third degree. And so the question is that can you, if that's the case, they send that. There's no disagreement on the sine die. If the sine die passes, that will all happen on Tuesday. And so if that passes, then the reason that the Senate and the House has agreed to end up extending the session is pursuant to the statute, which allows them to end up having an extension if the estimates end up coming back lower than what they had expected, basically. And so from our perspective, I've been told that if we can finish that on the first day, that's all we're going to do.
Well, gentlemen, I think this is Helen. I think we can leave that to y'all's great wisdom. And if we can, Ted and Sarah, if we can bring forth the information from the business community to serve our elected officials, I think that would certainly be helpful to all of them. So let's do that next week. Jennifer, was there some consideration on which day you want us to be together, Wednesday or Tuesday?
Well, I would assume, Sarah and Ted, that we would want Tuesday's legislative activities to occur and then meet on Wednesday, and we might have a little bit better direction. Is that fairly accurate?
Yeah, that's Ted. I'm not sure that it matters. I mean, you know, the legislation we're proposing wouldn't pass next week anyway. So I think the thought is we'll present to the group what we believe is reasonable safe harbor legislation for the COVID-19 pandemic. And, you know, then we would need people like John and other business leaders, you know, to ask the legislature to come back and address it. You know, I know businesses are telling us, you know, they don't feel like they can open back up unless there's those protections in place. So I think it's important, if we really want to start back the economy, it's important that we have some of those provisions in place.
Thank you for that. I think we could go ahead then. And Jennifer, why don't you just want to see when would be the easiest to get everyone together where we could have the best participation? Okay. What else do you have on your list?
That is all I have. Next meeting and topics for the next meeting were the last items.
That's great. Mr. Chairman, James Burns, what do you have to say to us before we depart?
So just a couple of things that I've heard. Oh, by the way, this is James speaking. Not even following my own rules. One thing that I think is important is I had handed out to everybody, y'all have each other, the folks that are on the accelerateSC committee, y'all have each other's contact information. And I certainly encourage you to communicate with one another about questions you may have. I don't want anybody to feel like we've just got to come together and congregate for you to be able to talk about things and look at developing solutions. One of the governor's big things with this group is he wants people to collaborate. He's got the 3 C's: collaborate, communicate, and it's not congregate.
It's connect.
Connect. Thank you, Lou.
Yeah. So I would just encourage y'all to do that. I know that Jennifer has kind of become a gathering, a consolidation point for getting, questions, recommendations, revisions, those kinds of things. But I just want to make sure that as those come in, that those are shared with all of the accelerateSC, the folks on this component, so that they have an opportunity to see that, comment on it, to provide input, so that we don't miss out on an opportunity for something, good, a good idea or something like that. So I know this has been a little bit of a challenge, and so thanks for your patience and doing it this way. I know the request was that if we could accommodate folks, because they traveled to Columbia earlier this week. And so this has been a bit of a challenge, but next week, I think we can gather back in person again. It may make things a little simpler. And so I would appreciate and beg your indulgence on coming to Columbia next week if you can. Absent anything, I just thank you again, everybody. Y'all are great. I mean, this is the exact kind of group that we needed to get together to work on these issues. So I don't have anything else. I'm not certain if the governor is still on the line.
The lieutenant governor is.
I know the lieutenant governor is, but I know the governor was on. He may have had to drop off. I'm not certain if he is.
Hey, James. Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm still here. Great meeting, great talks. Y'all keep it up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and everyone. Again, thank you to our great team. Jennifer, you're doing a fabulous job. Wayne Parrish, you're awesome. And thank you to all of our partners at DHEC and OSHA. Y'all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, and I'll be in touch. Meeting dates and more guidance, and Ashley's contact info.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Zach, for hosting.
Thank you.
I like Bobby's dog.
Got to